But in terms of infrastructure, what limits most people is cooler space. Sure, there's a local locker in your town, but you're not just going to go buy a pig and drop it off tomorrow because they're most likely booked out easily till the spring.
Welcome to MeatsPad, a platform to share breakthrough knowledge that is accessible to the entire meat industry. Be ready to hear from meat specialists who will talk about numerous topics in meat science, including animal welfare, meat production, meat quality, and so much more.
Hello folks, welcome to the MeatsPad podcast again this week on this episode. My name is Francisco Nahara, I'm your host today. It is a pleasure to have Derek Schroeder. He's a slaughter equipment and meat processing specialist at Ultrasource. Welcome Derek. Well, it's a pleasure to have you on this episode. Before we start this conversation, please tell us a little bit about you, about your educational background, so the audience can have a better sense of what you do and some of your roles at your company.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Francisco. So again, Derek Schroeder. I work for Ultrasource, based in Kansas City, Missouri. I specialize in the kill floor equipment and the processing equipment lines, grinders, stuffers, smokehouses, injectors, things of that nature. Got into the meat processing industry, kind of on trying to blaze my own trail, I guess. I got my bachelor's degree in animal science from the University of Nebraska, and then went on to get a master's degree at the University of Nebraska as well, and coach a couple meat judging teams. And like most master's degree students, you think you're going to go work for Tyson or Cargill or some of the other big guys in R&D. And I met up with Noah Hall, who's now my boss here at Ultrasource, at the Reciprocal Meats Conference career fair, and he said, just look us up when you're getting ready to graduate. So interviewed with a couple places, and then thought I should reach out to Noah and see what they got, and got hooked up into the meat processing equipment sales business, and kind of never looked back. And that's been 6.5 years ago. So learned a lot, and it's actually a great deal of fun. So you use your meat science background a lot more than you might think in the sales game.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you mentioned something like when you graduate, and this is for our audience that are pursuing a bachelor's or just going in grad school at. Thinking about, maybe small companies, you learn more because you're responsible for a lot of areas and then just get exposed to a lot of things that is not an area of expertise. In my mind, that's something that I value a lot.
Like, a lot of small, whether they're lockers or small to mid-sized processors, really don't have the pull in a small community or with a small, labor force to be able to go and hire somebody with a master's degree, and somebody that went to graduate school might not think, well, I'm going to go work for a small processor, because you think you got a graduate degree, so you're worth $100,000. That's really not the case. You're not going to come out and make that. But, it really, being in an equipment sales position, gives you access to a lot of people that might not have access to meat science knowledge, which is good. You get to interact and almost be their guy that they call for meat science advice, whether it's sausage making, what is my equipment doing to this product? How can I make this product? That type of stuff. So you're not so much a salesman as you are a consultant. And if guys, if you give good advice, a lot of times they'll come back to you. So.
Yeah, and I agree. And I got the pleasure to help with a few of the meat science academies that you guys hold at Ultrasource. And so that's how I got to meet you maybe a couple years ago. And the reason we're talking today is because I approached Derek a couple of weeks ago about some of the interests of asking about. Now we see this boom when it comes to the mobile slaughterhouses, when we see this shift from butcher shops that may expand their slaughter capacity. We see now it's booming. A lot of people are just going into this new concept. Well, it's not new concept, right? But it's just I mean, it's always been there, but now it seems like a lot of people are going to go local, and they're demanding more local meat. Therefore, so we saw a lot of questions from the audience asking, what are some of the things that we have to take into consideration when, if we were used to kill 20 head of cattle, 20 hogs a week, and then we got more customers coming in and we're expanding, we're maybe doing twice as much. I think this episode is going to be focused on that and dedicated to talking about some of these factors that we have to take into consideration. So, I mean, what's your take on that?
Yeah, great question. We see that a lot right now with the COVID deal and everyone wanting to go direct to the farmer, which really puts a burden on the small custom or small federal plants in all the rural locations across the country. So we are seeing a big uptick in guys adding rails, putting in new coolers, adding in onto their kill floor. One of the big things everyone needs to think about, and I'm sure most of them have pretty well thought of it, is, do I have the number of people to actually to get this done, to kill and then to cut if I double my kill? But in terms of infrastructure, what limits most people is cooler space. You know, sure, there's a local locker in your town, but you're not just gonna go buy a pig and drop it off tomorrow, because they're most likely booked out easily till the spring. I talked to a customer today that was out till June, so a year. So things people need to consider is cooler size, rail space. You know, if you want to kill, go from 20 to 40 head a day, you'd better have a hotbox or the cooler that the carcasses go into right off of the kill floor when they're hot. That's the term hotbox. That can hold that 40 head. You know, that really limits your kill. If you can't put 40 in there, you can't kill that many in a day. You know, and we do see some guys that just run one big cooler and they'll push, you know, hot carcasses in with their carcasses that have been hanging for a week or 14 days or whatever. But, you know, there's reasons to not do that in terms of product quality, things like that, where if I push hot carcasses in, humidity starts to come off, and I might not be able to generate enough air. That cooler might not have been designed to handle that heat load. And then we start to see like some slimy carcasses or moldy carcasses or stuff like that, which just results in, you know, extra trim coming off in the cover.
Great.
So really thing to think about is cooler size and how many days you're going to kill. You know, if you're going to kill every single day, not only do you need a hot box that's going to match that kill, but then you got to have a hanging cooler that's going to be able to accommodate that many kill days, especially if you want to get into that dry aged product. You know, if you want to hang for 21 days and you're going to kill 20 head once a week, well, you've got to have now a hot box or a carcass cooler that's going to hold at least 60 beef carcasses, you know, for your 3 weeks of kill. And that's something to consider as well. Most small guys right now that I've talked to, you know, aren't going to do a whole lot of aging because they strictly just can't afford to tie up cooler space for that long right now in particular. So those are things to think about, you know, in terms of cooler layout and design. You know, the old basics, 3 feet off the wall, rails 3 foot apart. We like to use the calculation or the general rule of thumb of 2.5 feet is a good ballpark number of linear foot of rail per beef carcass. I've seen it up to 3. I've seen it less than 2. So I'm just going to call it in the middle and use that as a pretty good number.
The Niche Meat Processor Assistance Network, or NPAN, is a proud sponsor of the MeatsPad podcast.
Hey Derek, we have some listeners that are completing their bachelor's in animal science or meat science or are in grad school like me. Would you tell them some advice in terms of work experience or some of the steps to follow?
Some advice for, you know, young students or young individuals that are in graduate school, looking to find their way in the meat industry, I guess, if you will. Think beyond, you know, the big companies. You know, you don't have to go and do R&D or flavor profiling at the big companies. There's a lot of quality work to be done at not only the small guys, but the mid-range processors as well. All the guys that are doing RTE, jerky, and sticks, most of those are growing businesses. They need sharp young minds. So don't be afraid to look into that. And then obviously, from my perspective, getting into equipment sales with a meat processing background, provided you've got, some technical abilities, say you worked in the meat lab as an undergrad and then you went to graduate school and you're really strong with your meat processing skills. Don't be afraid to look into the meat processing equipment sales side of the business, because that it gives you kind of a leg up, and people sometimes respond well to it when you can go in there as a salesman, quote unquote, that doesn't know anything, and make sausage and run equipment and say, hey, this is why this product looks like this compared to this one. This is why we use this ingredient. So you see a lot of that. And it just, customers really appreciate it if you can try to share a little bit of your knowledge, while also, obviously you learn stuff from guys that have been doing it for 30 years that, they obviously don't have a degree, but guess what? They've been processing meat and can certainly outperform you on the kill floor and probably in the processing room too. But they might not know why they're using a certain ingredient or why they push this button on the machine versus the button over there. So, look outside the big companies, look at the small to mid-range processors. And honestly, don't be afraid to find a small locker. If you have a passion for processing, don't be afraid to go for it. There's nothing wrong with working with your hands and earning your living and working for yourself. So, this is the United States of America. You can kind of decide you want to go do something and go do it.
Good. Thank you. Thank you a lot for sharing that. I think that's very, very valuable information and advice to those young graduates that they're trying to find or think about what they're going to do in the future. But
good. Now, so kind of going back to what we were talking about the expansion in your role, how do you help meat processors when they come up with those questions?
Yeah, actually, I was working on one just today where a customer reached out and said, hey, I am looking to do an addition to my kill floor, or actually build a new kill floor and use my current kill floor as a hotbox, because he was one of those guys that just had a kill floor and a 30 by 30 cooler that would hold, I think he said 40 beef. So he sent me just a little hand sketch of what he wanted with dimensions of the cooler, and his old kill floor was 16 by 24. And I kind of dropped that in there using 3 foot off the walls and rails 3 feet apart. So if I take the 24 minus 6, I've got 18 linear feet of rail. I could put 4 rails in there. 18 times 4, that's 72 divided by 2.5. That's going to hold about 28 to 29 beef carcasses. So that's a plenty big cooler.
so now we talk a little bit about infrastructure and some of the things that they have to consider. You mentioned very importantly that so workforce and the processing capacity. Tell us a little bit about that. And do you need more people in the processing line? Can you actually do that, and you have to get more people in to help you cut?
Yeah, certainly. If you're going to double your kill, you might not need to necessarily double the amount of people. It might just be adding on a couple of hours. A good 2-man crew should be able to put 10 head in the cooler pretty easily before lunchtime. So, if you add a couple more guys to that, you're going to be into that ballpark. But in terms of the actual processing room and being able to cut those carcasses, because it doesn't do you a whole lot of good to be able to hang them if you can't get them cut into bags and into the freezer to the customer. You're definitely going to need to either hire a couple people or get more efficient with your equipment, whether that's going from butcher wrapping to backpacking, or from a single chamber to a double, or a double to a roll stock, or from, you know, hand wrapping your grind or doing it off of a mixer grinder, off of a stuffing horn, and then into a piston stuffer. Or if you want to even go, you know, take more labor and add more efficiency to it, you're just run it off a vacuum stuffer where you have portion control, so everything's, you know, 1 pound, 2 pounds, 5 pounds, what have you. So yeah, you're going to need to either add more people or get more efficient on the equipment.
Cool. One of the also some of the concerns from for meat processors work, if I'm starting to put in more carcasses into our hotbox, if I don't do it right, what are some of the quality defects, or from your experience, what have you encountered when we talk about expanding the slaughter capacity?
Well, that can be, you know, the hotbox is very important in terms of spacing, because you don't want those carcasses crammed in there and touching, because that's going to result in, you know, not getting airflow, which is going to help pull moisture off the surface and continue to dry or cool that carcass, pull that heat and humidity out. So if you've got them touching, you know, I think of it a little bit like hot dogs in the smokehouse. If the hot dogs are touching, where they're touching isn't going to get smoke. If your carcasses are touching, that's where, you know, you're not going to be pulling moisture out of. So you're not going to see as great of a temperature drop. So, but, you know, some guys get around that by just adding a big fan in there and moving a lot more air. So the older places, you know, when you start cramming them in there, those cooling units weren't necessarily designed to handle that load. So most guys that are putting stuff in right now are gonna do, hey, we're gonna figure out how many we can absolutely cram in there. We're gonna add a little bit more, and then we're gonna size the cooling units for that, so they know with a pretty high degree of certainty that they're gonna be able to cool carcasses. In terms of quality defects that you can see, you know, there's all sorts of research out there that relates to, you know, temperature drop and pH drop and that kind of thing, and how rigor sets in and that kind of stuff. So I'm sure Francisco can put you onto a lot of literature that you can read up for that. I think there's some Texas A&M stuff out there that's a pretty good white paper if you want to read about that.
Yeah, absolutely. That brings another good question that maybe we can talk about it in another episode. Then kind of the last question would be, what do you think about the mobile slaughterhouses? So we see that they're becoming more popular, so to speak. What's your take on that?
Yeah, definitely. I think the mobile slaughter concept, it's been around for a while, and it's pretty international. You know, we're on a lot of Facebook groups where we see, you know, in Australia and in the UK, New Zealand, you know, the mobile slaughter deal is really pretty big there. You know, it's starting to catch on here in the U.S., and I see that to continue to grow. You know, there's several companies out there that are turning out modular units that are really nice. You know, they range from very basic, you know, on the back of your pickup truck as a simple box, to something that's, you know, hauled around with a semi, and that's a full-on, you know, slaughter floor with a hide puller and platforms and the cooler. You know, you're killing 15 to 20 a day at a location. So you get pretty high tech there. But the really nice thing about those is, you know, I think some of those guys can really help you, you know, get that to be USDA certified, as opposed to trying to go through all the channels of a brick and mortar. So they can help you kind of navigate some of those waters. But in terms of the actual concept itself, you know, there's something to be said for not having to necessarily wait 3 to 4 months to get killed. You know, if you've got a local guy in the area that has a mobile slaughter unit, or really, I mean, a pickup truck with a cooler on the back, he can come out, kill your beef, haul it to a locker of your choosing, or if he's got a processing cooler, he can take it back there. Or there's some guys that have a setup right there on the farm. So, yeah, it's a great way to kind of work on your schedule, so that way you don't have to, hey, I'm out 6 months on here, I have an emergency. So, you know, and then you don't have to haul your animals, so you're seeing a little bit of the handling stress go down. I've even seen, it's big in the buffalo kind of business where they'll go out to the range, shoot one, kind of field dress it, and then haul it back in. So it's an interesting deal. I've not been in too many of them, but it definitely has its place, and it's growing for sure. Especially, with a lot of small to mid-sized facilities, showing their age. It's a lot cheaper to put up a couple modular units that you can just kind of set where you want. They're pretty well built and USDA certified, so kind of takes a lot of the guesswork and time out of it, so you can get into it a lot faster.
And you mentioned something very important that you said. I think about it. Okay, myself, just like as an example, I slaughter 20 head of cattle a day. And then something happened with a shoot box. Now I have to find something. I have the cattle. I have them in my facility. So I mean that it's just difficult to get it out. I mean, it's just easier to have another option for those animals to get slaughtered. You mentioned something about USDA certified. So if your facility is USDA inspected, and then you have a mobile slaughter coming in,
I think there'd have to be an inspector on site, obviously, but the building itself or the trailer itself would be, it'd have all the features, the stainless sinks, the wall coverings, be washed down, all that kind of stuff.
Oh, okay.
It would, the trailer or the modular unit or whatever you would have it would be like very easy to get certified. The mobile slaughters probably primarily custom.
But thank you, Derek, for accepting the invitation and being on this episode. We appreciate it a lot, and hopefully we'll see you soon next.
Yeah, definitely. We'll look forward to being a guest again and catching up with you.
All right, folks, with this, we finalize this episode. Thank you a lot for listening. Be ready to hear from more meat specialists. In the following episodes, we'll be talking about meat color and packaging. In addition to that, we'll also be talking about some of the factors to consider to optimize meat tenderness in our facilities. Thank you a lot, and remember to subscribe at www.meatspad.com. Thank you, and stay tuned.